How to live from the gospel the apostles' way. Do you not know that those who officiate in the sacred services of the temple eat from the temple offerings of meat and bread? And those who regularly attend the altar have their share from the offerings brought to the altar. So also, on the same principle, the Lord directed those who preach the gospel to get their living from the gospel. But I have used none of these privileges, nor am I writing this to suggest that any such provision be made for me now. For it would be better for me to die than to have anyone deprive me of my boast in this matter of financial support. 1 Corinthians 9:13-15. What are our takeaways from the verses mentioned? Those who officiate in the sacred service get their food from the temple. In the same principle, the Lord directed those who preach the gospel to get their living from the gospel, meaning the preacher of the word has the right to get their living from the gospel, which is what they preach. Now, if this direction of the Lord to get their living from the gospel was mandatory to obey, then Paul, who said that he did not use this right, must still somehow obey. Meaning, the mandatory part was not the collecting of financial support to live from the gospel, rather it was living from the gospel. Sure, you can also live from the gospel by receiving financial support for your personal expenses, but this was not the apostles' way of living from the gospel. Their means were different. Remember that the gospel is Jesus Christ himself, and he is the manifestation of the power and wisdom of God, as read in 1 Corinthians 1:24. Once you live from the wisdom and power of God, meaning you embody the wisdom and power of God in your life, you will get the blessing to which you are able to manage your life in such that you also can work and at the same time preach, so that you don't become a burden to your follower. This is what the apostles have done, which they said followers ought to follow. We read, "For you remember, believers, our labor and hardship. We worked night and day, practicing our trade, in order not to be a financial burden to any of you while we proclaimed the gospel of God to you." 1 Thessalonians 2:9. Nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it, but with labor and hardship we worked night and day to pay our own way, so that we would not be a financial burden on any of you for our support. Not because we do not have a right to such support, but we provided our own financial support to offer ourselves as a model for you so that you would follow our example. 2 Thessalonians 3:8-9. Now this is not to say that apostles did not accept financial support. They did as read. I robbed other churches by accepting more than their share of financial support for my ministry to you. And when I was with you and ran short financially, I did not burden any of you. For what I needed was fully supplied by the brothers, Silas and Timothy, who came from Macedonia, the church at Philippi. So I kept myself from being a burden to you in any way, and will continue to do so. As the truth of Christ is in me, my boast of independence will not be silenced in the regions of Achaia, southern Greece. 2 Corinthians 11:8-10. But notice, he did not receive it so that he could buy food for himself, but so that he could minister to others. And he only ran short financially, meaning he did spend his own money, but he ran short, thus accepted help from others. Again, not for himself, but for him to help others.